Hello everyone. So this video is going to be an introduction. Let's call it a part one to the world node's terrestrial ecosystem mode. Now, what this does is it allows us to create a scientifically plausible, shall we say, distribution of trees and plants and things on a landscape. And this is extremely quick to set up. And you have lots of control over it, and we can set up different tree types with genotypes if you want to. So there's kind of layers of complexity to this that you can use if you want to, or if you just want a nice looking natural distribution, then you don't need to kind of use these extra layers of complexity. So we have all sorts of advanced features like map-based IDs, soil moisture, soil quality, temperature, slope variance, all this kind of stuff. But it's all turned off by default. So you've got to kind of turn all of the complexity on if you want it. But from its kind of most basic point of view, it's pretty simple to use. And so let's get started. Some of the more advanced features, like the terrain moisture and terrain quality, like soil quality, and our shade features, so things growing in shade and things not growing in shade and all that kind of stuff, I will save for a second video. But in this first video, we'll just cover the basics. So I'm going to start off by opening a new scene, and we'll take it from there. So new scene, cube, and I'll just create a mesh network. So create mesh network, and then I'm just going to add a world node just so we can see what's going on. So hopefully you've already watched the other video about the cluster modes. Down here right at the bottom we have a terrestrial ecosystem mode. Let's turn that on. Turn off the cluster. Roll up the cluster and then roll down the terrestrial ecosystem settings. And if I zoom out here and then just increase the ecosystem age here, see all this stuff happening. All of these points appearing from nowhere. In fact, what I'm going to do is I will just go into the genotype editor. Bear with me, I'll show you what this means in a second, and I'm going to change the model size from 10 to 1 because that cube is one point in size. So now you should hopefully be able to see what's going on. So here's our ecosystem, and there's our original points there. And then if I just keep this going, you'll see that more points appear, more and more points appearing, and the way that they are kind of scattered is as we say, it's scientifically plausible. So did lots of research into different ways of simulating terrestrial ecosystems, and settled on one that we found produced extremely good results with the shortest calculation time. So yeah, I mean, so you make this is the setting just to get you going is this ecosystem age. So this is literally simulating this many years of an ecosystem. So if I turn this up, and as you can see, the simulation is temporally stable, which means that you can do time lapses of things appearing and dying over time. So pretty cool. And yeah, so that's your kind of your basic setting. So some of these points are appearing in clumps over here, and that's because we simulate wind as well. So some seeds being blown further away. So here's what's happening. A tree grows up, drops some seeds. That tree grows up, it drops some seeds. That tree grows up, it drops some seeds. And the kind of the clumps appear again, like I said, because of the wind simulation. And then all of the kind of the rules for how old a tree is when it drops some seeds, and how far away they are, and how many seeds does it drop, and all that kind of thing, and how old does a tree last, are all controlled in this genotype editor, which I nipped into just before. So we have this maximum age, we have how old a tree is when it starts dropping seeds, how many does it drop every year, how much does a tree grow every year. The model size here is all about stopping intersections, and it should be based on how large your model is going into the system. This is manual at the moment. We would like to make it automatic in the future, but you're going to have to wait for another version of Maya for that. But at the moment, this is just type in a manual number, just however big your object is. That cube is 1 unit wide, so that's how we know that this is correct. We've got a slope threshold here, which is how steep a slope can be before the tree will stop growing. And then we've got a randomizer, which randomizes all of these elements. And then we've got these objects ID here, which is kind of a controller for which model on the instancer or on the repro node that your tree gets. And then this ID color down here is for an inner time. Explain that later. So what we can do here is we can randomize genotypes, so we can assign them label colors, we can load a preset. There aren't many presets, and sorry, they'll have to come later. And we can add a new genotype just by right-clicking Add Genotype, or you can just use this Add Genotype button here. So whenever you make a change to the ecosystem, so let's say that the seed age is suddenly going to be 20, whenever you make a change, you have to hit this refresh button up here. So suddenly there are fewer trees because our trees are not seeding until they're much older. If we lower this number, so I just typed in a new number and then committed it by pressing return or enter, and then we hit refresh, then we'll have more trees, and that's because they're seeding younger. And yeah, that's kind of how this works. So yeah, so that's kind of the basics really of the system, and a few more settings that we can use, right? So we've got some extra bits down here. We've got a seed multiplier, which is basically a global multiplier for the seed count. So you can use that to create kind of a less healthy ecosystem, as it were. So that's kind of factored into the simulation. Whenever we drop seeds, we drop whatever the seed count is multiplied by this amount. We also have this max elements, which is basically a controller for how many trees or plants in the ecosystem we keep track of. So this is just to prevent, if you've got an enormous landscape, it's to prevent things from getting completely out of control. If you go into the genotype editor and then you say, how many seeds does this tree drop, and you type in 1,000, then you could very quickly end up just with a calculation that's going to take hours to complete. So this max elements is basically stopping users from committing suicide effectively. So that's what that's there for. It's like on the distribute node in Mesh, we have a max voxel count. Down here we've got this maximum voxel count, which will just save you if you choose a size of voxel that is impossibly small. So that's just what that's about, basically. So we also have this sparsity control. So if I turn sparsity down, well, if I turn sparsity up to say something like 5, then our trees will all be kind of further apart, and that's because the sparsity means that each tree wants more space, and so that's what this controller is for. So you turn that lower than 1 to get a more densely packed kind of ecosystem, and then you turn it above 1 to get a more sparse ecosystem. We've also got random rotations here. We've got we have some ground mesh controls here, and I will show you all of them except for, well, I'll show you the input mesh, but I won't show you calculate shade at all for this video. So starting a new scene afresh, something else I just wanted to show you quickly before we get into the big heavy terrain is avoidance. So I'm just going to quickly go and set up that scene again, just setting our model size to 1, setting the cluster mode to terrestrial ecosystem, and then let's go travel forward a few years. Yeah, something I wanted to show you was avoidance. So let's, we need, for avoidance to work properly, so avoidance is down under this avoidance roll down. For avoidance to work properly, you need a ground mesh. So let's create a ground mesh like this, and then we'll, I'm just going to give this a darker color so we can see what's going on. And then we'll add this to our world nodes. Ground mesh, just roll down, so just drag that plane onto the input mesh here. So that limits the ecosystem to the input mesh. All the other points that were going off it will disappear. And what we can do now is, for example, if I take us to 120 years, got a few more trees going on. Let's just increase the seed count to say 8 and refresh this just to see if we can get some even more. So loads and loads and loads of trees. So what I'm about to do is going to be quite slow, but it's worth showing you. There are a few ways to do what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to add a curve to the scene. There you go. And I'm going to drag the curve onto the objects to avoid here. So watch what happens when I do that. So I drag the curve onto the objects to avoid, and you'll notice something interesting has almost happened. So the objects have kind of tried to avoid the curve, but not by much, right? So you can see there's definitely a discernible gap where the curve is. The avoidance radius is set to 1, so let's set that to 10, right? And then I can show you how this works. So as you can see, the avoidance radius is set to 1, but the some objects are still appearing right near the middle, and that's because of this graph. So the graph is, if you're right on top of the object, so if you're right at the curve line, don't grow, but progressively get more likely to grow the further out you are from the avoidance radius. Okay, so that's how that works, and the way to adjust this, I'm actually just going to turn off the node completely. I'm going to add another point in here, just so that there is more of a clear zone away from the curve before we start getting points, and I'm just going to enable this again. Sometimes it's easy to avoid expensive calculations like that. And there we go, we've avoided objects where the curve is. And of course this works like if the curve was following a landscape or whatever. Another way to do this is to paint vertex colours. So you can paint vertex colours where you want objects to grow and where you want them to not grow. So you just grab this, and you can then literally just paint if I go into the modelling tool set, and then mesh display, paint vertex colours. You can paint white where you want your objects to grow and black where you don't want them to grow. I'll show you that in the next video. And just something to note is that the objects to avoid drop zone accepts meshes, curves, Bezier curves, and mesh nodes. So you can actually use mesh points as avoidance objects. So you could use one mesh network to say, don't grow around me. So you could say scatter some, you could use the placer node with a mesh network to put some points on a surface, or you could use clusters or whatever you want to do. And then you could drag that mesh network, drag the weighter into another ecosystem to say, don't grow plants around these existing objects. So you can create some really complex setups really quickly. So yeah, that's that. And then just something to be aware of, the place node, the world node is very quick actually at what it does, because of the millions of calculations that happen every time you adjust something. But just be aware that it is not super real time. Like, you're not gonna, if you animate the ecosystem age going from an age of 0 to an age of 120, you're not going to get 60 frames per second playback, and that's just because of the millions and millions of things going on in the background. Just something to be aware of. You make an adjustment, you might have to wait a couple of seconds. So if I change the ecosystem age now to 100, that's just taken 2 seconds to update, and so just be aware that this isn't as fast as some of the other mesh nodes, but it is still pretty quick. The simulation is completely deterministic, so that it's the same every time. And it was something else I was going to mention. Oh, just to be clear, that the ecosystem is simulating 100 years worth of plant growth. So that's what happens when you make an adjustment. We go through and we resimulate as if these trees or plants have existed for 100 years, and so that's what's happening. That's what the ecosystem age controls. Okay, so now let's move on to our landscape project. So here we are in our landscape, and I've decided to give our trees different colours so that we can see them more easily. And this is just maybe something you want to do as a diagnostics thing, just making sure you get the balance in your ecosystem somewhere that you artistically are happy with. But yeah, I'm just doing it so that it's obvious. So here we have our trees. We have 4 trees, and we've got them at different stages of their age. So we've got young and mature, and we'll be assigning IDs to them based on how old the trees are. Let's grab all of our trees in age order. So young to old, hold down the shift key. So young, middling to old, like so. And then we'll create a new mesh network. And here are our trees. The ID defaults to 0. So something actually I'm going to explain before we actually get going is I'm going to grab the terrain here, and I'm going to go into the modeling menus and show you the paint vertex color, and I've painted black where the river is, basically, just so that no trees will grow there, because the terrain goes underneath the river. So I've also painted some grey areas, which means that trees will be a lot less likely to grow there as well. So just something to be aware of. If you're wondering why this all looks a little bit weird, it's because I ran polyreduce on it, just to lighten the load on my poor iMac display. So I'm just going to turn off the color display there, and then here's our mesh network. So back to our regularly scheduled program, and I'm going to drag our landscape in. So just hold down shift and click on the plus, which will just open up all of these subfolders below something, and then I'm going to drag our landscape in so that we get some initial points. Now, why have I done that? Well, the world node needs some original seed positions, and these are useful for several reasons, but effectively all you need to know from the get-go is that without some seeds to propagate, nothing can grow. So effectively this is the kind of just throwing down some seeds in the landscape and then seeing what happens. So you do that with the distribute node, or you can do it with the placer, or whatever you want to do, as long as it goes before the world node. Let's just turn off calculate rotation because we want our trees to point upward, and we can assign random rotations afterwards if you want to. Let's add a world node now. So by default this goes into the cluster mode. We want terrestrial ecosystem, and you notice that our trees are hovering, and that's because we need to drop our landscape into the input mesh here. So let's do that. So let's grab our landscape again and then drag it into the input mesh, and so our trees are now on our landscape. And if I kind of like run through the years here, you'll see more trees appearing and growing up and all that kind of thing, and with all our random rotations and all that kind of thing. And then so after about 80 years we end up with something like this. So pretty cool. So obviously there are lots and lots of intersections going on here, and that's because our model size is wrong. Now I'm going to guess these because I didn't actually measure the models, but if you're doing this properly you would measure the models, but I think this one's going to be something like 30 scene units wide. So I'm just going to hit refresh, and I think I've got that quite wrong. I think it must be 20. So yeah, something like that. Okay, so you end up with a landscape more like this. So the larger a tree, the further away it can its seeds can travel, which is why you end up with something like this. So if I rewind the simulation, you can see that the spread of the seeds now happens like this. Yeah, so that's that. You can control all of these. Remember, you can control a seed multiplication and sparsity and all that kind of thing on a global level. But right now we're going to add some more genotypes into the ecosystem. So let's do that. We're just going to add a second genotype, and I'll call this tree 1, and then we'll call this tree 2. So you can give specific IDs to trees, and to do that you just go to the object ID and you hit, so let's say that we want this tree to be ID 6, so let's hit refresh. And now what's going to happen is every other tree in our ecosystem, every other seed, so these original 11 seeds, half of those are now going to have, randomly, half of them are going to be assigned ID 6, and half of them are going to be assigned object ID 0. So they're going to, the genotypes will be split like randomly, and that means that half the trees will be of one type and half will be of another. So of course, because this is random, it might not be split down the middle. It might be 8 of one and 4 of another kind of thing. So it is random, and you can just there's a random seed on the world node that will affect this. Where is it? Down here. So if we change the random seed, we get a different distribution. So yes, that's kind of how this works. And worth pointing out actually that I think this second ecosystem that I've made, the model size will be wrong again. Actually, I don't think the model size is too wrong for that one. Maybe it needs to be something like 15. Okay, so let's zoom out, and if for example we were to make this second ecosystem, let's just label this one green because the tree is green, and then let's label this one blue because the tree is blue, so we can just imagine what's what. If we change the seed count on this tree to say 2 and then hit refresh, we get a lot fewer of them, so hardly any of them really, just because that's what's happening. So that gives you a clue as to what's happening there. So let's change that to 3 and then refresh, and then you can just play with the settings. So let's say that the blue tree doesn't like growing on slopes, but the green tree does. So if we change the slope threshold on the green tree to something like 0.4 and hit return, they like slopes. And then on the blue tree, if we change the slope threshold to say 0.7, then they will, well, let's change it to something really obvious, so 0.8. They're going to stay away from the from any kind of like hilly areas. So notice there are hardly any blue, well, there are no blue trees where it's sloping here, and there are no blue trees where it's sloping here, but there are green ones. And so you can kind of control individual characteristics about the trees like so. So I said that when these original seeds on the distribute node, they get assigned randomly to the genotypes. The way that you would control that, if you wanted specifically a tree, the seed that starts over here to be assigned one ID, and the seeds that start, say, over here, a different ID, that's what the ID map is for. Sorry, it's not called an ID map, it's called a genotype map. So you would assign a ramp or a texture or something to this slot here, and then that will be used along with the UVs of the underlying landscape mesh to assign IDs based on this ID color. I will show this in a different video, but that's kind of like just a hint into how you control specifically what IDs are where. Obviously, you can control this. This would be what seed IDs. If you wanted to specifically say, I want all of the trees over here to be of one type, you would either do that with the placer node by painting the IDs, or you would do it with the ID node by setting IDs with that. So. Just something to be aware of, that this being a natural simulation, there will be intermingling, so that you couldn't guarantee that all the trees over here will be blue if you use the genotype map, just because the green trees will drop seeds over there and some of them might survive and all that kind of thing. So, well, I'm doing a lot of talking when I should be showing you things. So I'll add some more genotypes. Let's add a couple more genotypes. So this genotype will be tree 3. Something else actually before we get there, more talking. Before we get there, let's assign IDs by age. So tree 1, we've got 3 IDs, 0, 1 and 2. So we've got young, mature. Oh no, tree 1 is young and mature. So let's set 0 and 1. So we can set a minimum ID 0 and a maximum ID of 1. And as soon as one of these values, well, as soon as the maximum ID is non-zero, then that means the object ID will be ignored. So we set a minimum ID of 0, maximum ID of 1, which means that based on their age, they'll be assigned a different model. So tree 2 is 2 to 4. So we go min ID 2, max ID 4, like so. And tree ID 3 is 5 to 7. Like so. So if we just hit refresh now, we should have some white trees in here. We do. Okay, so that's white. Fair enough. No white trees over on this side of the river. I guess it's because the seeds for the white ones are only over here. And then we will add another one, which is tree 4, and its ID, so where do we finish there? So this will be 8 to 10. And refresh that, and then I think the colour of these will be yellow. So let's just change the label colour to yellow. So that should tell you what's going on there. And then what we can do is, we can dock this actually if we want to, but I'll just move it out of the way. And I'll just go and set the age to be 120 years of ecosystem growth. And then here we go. Here's our resulting ecosystem. And of course, those last trees, those yellow trees, we probably need to, the yellow trees, we probably need to change the size of them. So let's change them to say 20 and then refresh the ecosystem. Okay, just to avoid our intersections. Like I said, you would probably measure that properly if you were doing this for realsies, but that gives you our mix of 4 trees over a landscape, and yeah, so with certain trees dominant in one area and others not in another, just because of the way that we have our initial seed set down by the distribute node. So for a much more intermingled look, you would just simply up this number, right? So if I up this number to say 100, then the seeds for all trees should be kind of all over the place. So we should have all the colours in all sections. So we've got the 4 colours over here, and we've got the 4 colours over here, and all that kind of thing. So we pop this down to say the 10 again, or was it 11? And then you end up with these kind of dominant areas because, say, the the only seeds over here would have been green and here green, and then the only ones over here would be white or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of how that works. And then you just control it with whatever kind of technique you want to get the look that you want. And then say if we're not happy with how many blue trees there are, we could go back in here and we could change the seed count to say 8 on this tree and refresh this, and that will give us loads more blue trees, and make you realise that your model size is still probably not quite right on that. Definitely not right on that. Yeah, so let's just update that and then maybe change that down to 6 and refresh. And I've killed it. I've killed them. What did I do? Let's come back. Okay, the model size is affecting where it casts its seeds, and obviously, if a seed is cast too near another tree, it won't survive, and because we simulate competition with other trees and all that kind of thing. So all of that stuff goes on. Anyway, what else? What else? So yeah, I'll just show you the sparsity control in here. So if I set the sparsity to say 10, the trees will, well, look at that. So the trees were obviously too close together because sparsity of 10 hasn't done anything. So if I set that to 20, you can see that the gaps between the trees are starting to increase. So if I set this to 50 now, see that the whole landscape is kind of more spread out. But if I set this back down to say 20 or whatever, much lower, or 1, then you end up with more densely populated landscape, and then set this down to the original of 1, we'll end up, because of my incorrect model sizes, you'll end up with some intersecting things. But, you know, that might be what you want. So, there's the long and the short of it. That is... whoa, anti-aliasing and this graphics card do not work well together. Yeah, so that's kind of the long and the short of how you set up an ecosystem. So I know it's pretty ugly just because I've used the different colours of tree there, but that's just showing you what's what. So there'll be another video where I go into using the maps here, which is the super advanced features, along with the calculate shade, which just means that things won't grow where the sun doesn't get to. So yeah, that's it. So hopefully you found it useful, and hopefully you found this feature useful, and just use it very quickly to scatter things in a plausible way on the landscape. So yeah, like I say, hope you find it useful. Questions on a postcard. Thank you very much for watching.